بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to everyone that's joining us this evening. Tonight we are joined and pleased to be joined by our sister Aishah Ali, the Executive Director at the Islamophobia Register Australia. Aishah Ali is a Fijian Indian lawyer, award-winning poet, writer, educator and community organizer whose work sits at the intersection of social justice, anti-racism and the advancement of Muslim women in Australia. She is the co-director of the Muslim Agenda, a leading national platform dedicated to creating critical, culturally safe spaces for Muslim women, and the founder and director of Mind If I Come, an offline mental health and suicide prevention initiative supporting women navigating trauma, divorce and recovery. Sister Aishah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you for having me.
Likewise, thank you for joining us tonight. And we're also joined by our regular LMA Secretary, Gamel. Kheir. Assalamu alaikum, Haj.
Alaikum salam. My bio is a bit smaller, but alhamdulillah. Good to be here. Welcome, sister.
Alhamdulillah. Just a little bit of a background what we're going to discuss tonight, inshallah. So after 10 months, the Australian government has finally responded to the Special Envoy's National Response to Islamophobia Report. While several recommendations were accepted, many of the report's key structural and policy reforms were not. In this episode, we ask whether the response goes far enough and why some of the most significant recommendations were left behind. So inshallah, we'll get straight into it as we're also limited on time until Aishah Adhan, inshallah. So, I mean, the government's accepted 35 of the report's 54 recommendations, which for the outsider who doesn't really look into it sounds all right. Like, you know, they supported the majority of them. Overall, do you feel or do you consider this is a meaningful response, or has the government accepted the easier recommendations while avoiding the more difficult structural reforms?
I'm happy to start. Look, there is some meritorious accommodations to be made for some of the programs that are implemented. Education task force, multicultural grants. You know, I appreciate Muslim leadership, Muslim female leadership programs, but substantively, the structural reform that the Muslim community needs to tackle Islamophobia, it's unanswered. Specifically, the first recommendation that UPTAB made in this report is to tackle Islamophobia with the same urgency as other discriminatory practices, in an equal way, with equal treatment and with equal protection, and that remains still hollow in the government's response.
Jamal,
very similar to Sister Aishah. I mean, the thing I want to add is, even though they've verbally said that they're going to adopt 35 of them, they haven't specified which 35 they are, which is a worrisome thing itself. You know, why rush on a Saturday morning of all days to go and announce something half-hearted, where you don't even announce what exactly that 35 implementations are going to be, what the funding arrangement will be for those. And again, like Sister Aishah said, and I agree wholeheartedly, that look, I use the word window dressing, and I don't shy away from it. They've window dressed the concept of Islamophobia, but for whatever reason, and only the government can answer, are not game enough to tackle the real structural issues that are prevalent within Australian society, and not just Islamophobia, just all forms of racism and bigotry.
Yeah. And Sister Aishah, I mean, from the recommendations, or, you know, the ones that we know were accepted, I think there were a couple that were known to be accepted. Which do you believe could make the greatest, like, practical difference to Muslim Australians? And which one needs to be implemented the most urgently, I guess?
Well, I'm sure there was a lot of consideration when AFTA put together the recommendations. I'm sure all of them came because they were pertinent, and I hate to prioritize one over the other, and I don't seek to do that. And I'll just speak on behalf of the register and the frontline community service that we do, right? This is the first point of call that people have to come to when they face Islamophobia, that's within community. And that was recommendation 9 of AFTAB's report, to ensure the respect and agency of community-led programming, for good reason. There's trust between us and the community. We know that there's historical distrust between us and the Muslim community and authority, and that's not just the Muslim community, it's across marginalized communities. It respects the credibility and the independence of our data, and that response is not tended to, and it needs to be tended to urgently. because it reduces the infrastructure that's been built over 12 years. And there is strong concern, and we spoke about this earlier, where if that data doesn't exist, will it accurately paint the picture of what Islamophobia looks like, in Australia at the moment?
True. And I guess the register's reporting mechanism is very effective. So even as a community organization, a lot of the times when we get, the hate speech and the threats, our first response is to go report it to the register and for them to take it on with police and stuff like that.
I think it's imperative that it's community led, and that's why I compliment the register, because the government, I would be very reluctant to support a government government stacked or a system organised by government in order to register Islamophobic events. The concept of having a community-based organisation that is trusted, and the oldest organisation as the register is, I think it's incumbent on government to ensure that it's fully funded. Because people that experience Islamophobia are reluctant to go to a non-Muslim, in this case specifically the police, without some sort of security or assurance from a community-based organisation as the register. And I think it's imperative that we ensure, or the government ensures, that they can be funded fully. They don't need to go hand to foot trying to exist. And I think it's crucial that government fund them and provide the ability for the register not only to service but to grow, because I'm sure that you're over.
We're a 3-person team. We have between October 7th till now, we have over 2,500 plus reports of incidences.
Wow.
And we have one dedicated victim support officer. So even as AD, I step in and help Nancy as much as I can to do these victim incidents reports. Yeah. And we have as principle, because we come from Islamic-centered ideas of compassion, of integrity. So we speak to these people. We give them, when you go to the police and they ask you to put your report, it's in a very matter-of-fact way. Yes. In a way that can almost diminish the emotional and mental impact of it. Yeah. We're dealing with people with lived experience. All of us in the team have experienced it directly, indirectly. And so we know how to deal with members of our own community. Yeah. In saying that, we have people outside of the Muslim community constantly report to us. Wow. So we have people who have worn Kheirs at a protest. They've had terrorists thrown at them, or they've had a physical assault. Yeah. And they report to the register because they know the register encompasses not just Muslims but expressions of Muslimness. That's part of the definition that we have. So it's a support that is invaluable. In saying that, there are other real important structural and legal recourse that has to be provided. I think it was recommendation 17. It occurs to me because of legal background, but on ensuring that there's an ethno-cultural definition attached to the Racial Discrimination Act, the same way that it does for the Sikh community and the Jewish community. We know that will give people an actionable method to prevent or combat Islamophobia when they're experiencing it. It will psychologically actually get them to report, because they know that there's actually a measure in place. The reason why we have underreporting is because the line I hear day in, day out is, what will actually happen? But what's the point? What's the point even? What's the point? And I understand that, because we know that there's no infrastructure in place for us to actually deter or prevent or prosecute people because of the lack and the absence in the Racial Discrimination Act. So recommendation 17, again, is a pertinent one that I would add to your question.
That goes to the heart of what we were talking about earlier, the structural reform. Yeah. And I think what the government approved, the substance that it lacked was the legal empowerment. Yeah. There was no legislative changes in order to support people who experience Islamophobia. I don't know how you do it, Sister Aishah, because our sisters are the main recipients of Islamophobia because they're so present. Yeah, it's so hard for them to go to a police who don't know the sensitivities of the faith and the culture. And you need to have the register not only be able to become a source of keeping records, but my belief is the register should be empowered financially to be able to employ people to assist them when they go to the police, because that's the most crucial time.
That's what we do.
That's where people don't want to go.
Yeah, that's exactly what we have to do. We end up being that mediatory force in having our own relationships with police and our own perspectives and issues with them. Understand that they present a protection and a security. So we take off that mental load from people having to do that, and it encourages them to actually make sure if their neighbour's done X, Y, Z, that there is some recourse on a safety and security level. And when there's no one in that exact position to do that, then what happens to that individual? Then, with the risk of sounding alarmist, and we constantly say this, but there is such a high risk of real actionable harm happening to our community because we're the early warning system, right? Like we're the alarm bell, and we've been dinging for ages now.
Yeah. But see, the thing that worries me, and you'd probably be better to answer with Sister Aishah, is even if they report it, the idea that it doesn't go any further than just being reported creates this psychological issue that person carries with them. And then you got to add to it, which I hate to talk about, the cultural baggage. The shame of going to police or to admit that your scarf was pulled off or you were spat on. And I think, look, credit to the government here. They have sort of indicated that they were going to fund cultural sensitivity courses with the police, government, and with education system. And I think it's long overdue. But I don't know how you get around the cultural baggage that we carry, and especially with women. It's so hard because there's this stigma about, coming home and telling them that your scarf was pulled off or you were spat on or you were caught, whatever they were caught. And so you carry that trauma.
Yeah.
And I don't know how. I don't know, Kheir, whether is that something that...
Yeah, it's definitely there. I mean, like even our staff at the LMA, when we've experienced, several, death threats or hate speech, we've gotten to the point where our staff actually just would get the letters, having tissue papers, coming straight up to me and telling me you open it, you do everything. We're not willing to go anymore down to the local police station.
Wow.
My husband doesn't want me to whatever. I'm concerned I'm going to be called in for my name's going to appear in the court case when it comes to the guy. So just for reference, we've had a lot of death threats and hate speech. So far, only one has been caught. One person has been caught. He was, I think, a little bit older, and he was given community service. So, I mean, from my end, for the first part of your question, I like to reframe it. And when they say, what's the point and things like that, I'm like, we got to keep reporting, and the way that it is, it's further and further evidence. Otherwise, it's in 2 years' time or 5 years' time, it's you've got a stack of evidence and more, things to rely on for further, programs and, to support the register, for example.
Yeah.
That's the most basic one, right? If you're not reporting to the register and you just keep saying, it's not going to do anything, how are they going to have the evidence that, they need all this support?
What does the counter reality look like? You don't report. And what does the evidence what's the story the evidence tells? That Islamophobia actually isn't happening.
Yeah.
And,
which falls directly into their narrative.
Exactly.
Becomes an undiagnosed symptom. Or the narrative is there's no such thing as Islamophobia.
Exactly.
Apparently.
Oh, and we get that constantly. I'm sure you have that. I was doing a review, and one of our board members did an online hate review, and every single time there's anything ancillary mentioned around Islam, on a Facebook post, there's hundreds. You probably have the same thing when you put a press release.
Yes.
I remember getting an incident report, and it is the most innocent piece of material. She's trying to help people, women go through safe pregnancies. It's a stillbirth commercial. Yeah. She's translated it into another language, hundreds, 300. Yeah. There's no mention of Islam. Only the video translates it in Arabic, and she wears a hijab.
Yeah.
There's no mention of Islam in the video. 300 plus comments.
But actually, the problem that I see, even if they mentioned Islam, there's no legislation that bans it, which is ridiculous. And this is, I've been pushing for governments that, the Jewish community gets around it because it's a race issue for them. And so they have racial protection. But what do we have?
Yeah,
that's why zero protection.
That's why Recommendation 17 was so important, and it was so disappointing that it wasn't even considered, because the recommendation wasn't even to include it as a category. It was to consider it.
Yes.
To just consider it. And they wouldn't, there was no mention of them even considering it.
Because when we go to government constantly, or the police, when we talk about Pauline Hanson online, we get over 2,000-3,000 comments. And the most derogatory, vile, feral comments, they're probably bots for all I know, but they're still disgusting comments. But they're legal. And then no other community has to tolerate it. And then again, that's undiagnosed trauma that you're dealing with, because, you're reading it constantly. And even me, who I'd like to think I'm hardened, it does get to you after a while, because, you can't help but have that resentment that this it's so misunderstood and it's so derogatory in terms of just a religion on no basis. But there's no protection.
Yeah, and the cumulative impact is that it emboldens other people to do it because they know that that behavior is unchecked and it makes it acceptable, and then the acceptability is normalized. And so I feel like it's an understatement to say Islamophobia is normalized, because as someone who's experienced it so many times before this position, wallahi, I never reported it.
Yeah.
And I had a barrister throw a pen at me once, never reported it. Because like you said, didn't even realize I was carrying baggage, but they have all these internal conflicts. But I feel like there is, at least speaking for myself, an almost acceptance that this is just what it means.
Correct.
Sadly, like subconscious, this is just what it means to be Muslim in Australia.
Yep.
But there's also stigma. I mean, that's the other thing. They created this concept of a stigma that, if you were to report it or complain about it, then you're a whinger. You're un-Australian somehow.
You can get doxxed. You can have adverse repercussions just for reporting it.
Yeah. So there's even a stigma about even talking about it. Yet there's this underlying, to me, an underlying sort of concept that this is what it is to be a Muslim Australian. Deal with it.
Yeah.
And don't complain about it. You're lucky to be here. How many times have you heard that? And it bores my blood. You're lucky to be here. You should be grateful that you're here. Okay, so if I'm in a jail cell and I'm being absolutely tortured to death, that's fine. I should be thankful for it because you brought me here. It's ridiculous. This concept, this stigma that you have. I don't know how you do it. I just don't know how you encourage sisters to come out of that issue, because I think if I was a female, I'd be very reluctant. I really genuinely would.
Yeah.
Because you're already, I hate to say behind the eight ball, but you're already sort of viewed in a different way. Yeah. And then to come out publicly and call it out for what it is, I think it's the most extreme brave act you could do. Yeah. Because you're so vulnerable and you're so identifiable.
Yeah, and that's a lot of consideration why there's not a lot of visible Muslim women other than in the register in this space, because it is a hard ask, to put yourself physically in that. I've had to have a lot of consideration to it. Whose gaze am I now in? Yeah. Whose eye line am I in? And what attitude am I gonna face as a result of it? But we were talking about this before, like divine purpose and qadar, and Allah puts you in a place where you need to be for a reason. Strongly believe that. And you got to have tawakkul, that you're doing the right thing, doing it sincerely. Yes. That's the most important thing. Like my dad really reinforced to me that do it with sincerity, clarify your intention, protect community, be honest about why you're saying certain things. So as long as I kind of lead with that kind of keeps a shield around me, like why I'm doing it, but also who will do it. Yeah. If we don't do it, who will? Yeah. And someone needs to advocate.
I think you can stretch that to, if we don't report, then who's going to do the reporting?
Yeah. Exactly.
And I think we have an obligation to call it for what it is. I have credit. I give credit to our Jewish cousins, because they will call it out. They have there's no stigma in calling it for what it is. And I think as a community, we need to be more vocal in calling it out for what it is. And it doesn't matter. We're gonna cop a lot of backlash initially because we're not the flavour of the month. But I think we need to. We have a moral obligation to call it out for what it is, and not to accept it anymore as this is part of society and part of life.
There are a couple factors with it too. It's almost like what you both mentioned. They've successfully conditioned us to believe that it's normal to feel like you're not, for people to look certain ways at you or say certain comments, that it's just normal. So there's this sense of hopelessness that they've instilled in a lot of us. Yeah. And I'll add, like, even for Muslim males, for example, from my experience dealing with a lot of them, they're just like, what? You're me because someone wrote a Facebook comment to me to, like, go make a big deal or, report it and stuff. And I'm just like, this is just going to get bigger and bigger. But for them, it's like, I'm not going to go to the police just for a Facebook comment, or I'm not going to go to the police because someone said something to me at the train station. Yeah. It goes back, to the cultural aspect also, or like what it means to be a male, things like that. So but you've got that for like the male perspective, and then obviously with the sisters, it's on a larger.
But there's subliminal ones. Like I don't know if you have them a lot, Sister Aishah. Things like like I remember when I was younger, many moons ago. And I had to change my name. To me, I look back and I think that's trauma. Yeah. When even your name becomes an issue in getting a job. You know, and I look at these young kids who are, you know, called Muhammad today, or, you know, God forbid, jihad. You know, like I had a friend who was called Jihad, and poor guy was absolutely tortured. You know, he wanted to change his name, and I said, well, why? That's not your issue. That's their issue.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. See, to me, that's Islamophobia.
Yeah.
You know, where that's sort of the subliminal prejudice. Even when it comes to employment or education.
It's actually real evidence. It's actually real evidence that shows, and this is, again, this is just my personal knowledge, but that when certain names are produced in resumes, that there's a lower chance of them getting callbacks. It's subconscious in us, but it's reinforced in reality too. Yeah.
Oh, that's what I mean. It is based on factual. I mean, when people get to the stage where they need to change, like I remember when I know we're going off tangent, but it's bringing back a lot of memories. And I went to a employment agency, and they honestly did tell me change your name. Yeah. Not because it was they didn't know it was a Muslim name, Jamel, because that's just a general. But they said, your name's very hard to pronounce. Yeah. Can't you just anglicize it somehow? Yeah. And to me it was like, yeah, okay, no worries. Need a job. But then I look back and I think, wow. Yeah. You know, like who else would have to deal with that sort of stuff? You know, and we're told to accept it. You know, it's just, and I think that needs to be reported. Like even something as simple as we think it's simple, that needs reporting, because if you don't report it, then becomes a norm. Yeah. Yeah.
And we do get reports like workplace incident discrimination reports, and even interview discrimination in the interview process as well. And if you don't actually address it, then it doesn't force institutions to have cultural safety practices. Yes. It doesn't get them to unpack their bias. So if you accept it as a norm, you also inevitably, without putting the burden on the reporter, create the norm, propagate the norm.
Well, you're contributing to it. Yeah, you're contributing to the standard. 100%.
Sister Aishah, let's look at a little bit, you know, what the register is seeing or what's coming through these days. So when people have been reporting Islamophobia to the register, to the viewers that are listening, you know, tonight, what are they experiencing most commonly? Is it like online abuse? Is it workplace discrimination? You know, what's coming through to the register?
Well, there's no shock, but there's a big spike in threats to mosques. You know, the Gamel Mosque. I was just saying earlier as well, my first week was the fifth threat, or the fourth or fifth threat to Masjid Taqwa in Brisbane. And the one that happened when I started was the threat that they had an AK-47 in the car. And Dr. Nora, my predecessor, you know, she went to the mosque, she offered them as much support as she could. She got media to put attention into it. So there's a big spike in threats to mosques. Even my local mosque, I'm not going to even say what area it is because I don't want people to know what area I live in. And I'm so protective of it because it took so long to build. Whatever, I'm giving it away. Allahu alam. Anyway, and the most troubling thing, to be honest, that I noticed over the last 3 months, just I'll speak to then and I can speak to before as well, is a rise of incidences involving children. Either children getting directly, so for a long time, children were participants to the abuse. So they were around while their mum got spat at or their mum got hurt or their dad got yelled at. Now children are being directly targeted, which is not something the register has seen in like a unprecedented way before. But there's a pattern of policing of kids in schools and the things that they talk about in their responses. And so that's a pattern at the moment that we're really, really concerned about. Aside from, you know, women still facing intense levels of discrimination, online abuse, again, is at an all-time high. That's reported by the Monash Tackling Hate Lab. They've done this incredible I think they went and assessed 1 million online responses. But yeah, the mosques at the moment, children and women still face a disproportionate level of Islamophobia. That's just based on the data that we received, but not discounting the fact that there is a lot of underreporting, you know, and we're conscious of how that affects the data and the statistics that come out, because there could be so much more happening in the health field, but people might not have awareness of the reporting measures. So I always caveat it with that. That's just what we're receiving, but it's not reflective of what we know anecdotally is actually happening in community and not getting actually fed into the register.
Yeah, I could imagine. Yeah.
And from the data that you have, are Muslim women still, you know, disproportionately targeted?
Yes.
particularly the ones wearing the hijab, which identifies them as Muslim women?
Yes, particularly the hijab and niqabi women. There was an incident not long ago, and just a family walking down the street, and someone threw like a rotisserie, like the bones of like a charcoal chicken on her head.
Wow.
In front of the kids. And these are young kids who have not yet formulated what their actual conception of the world is just yet. That's one of many. We have on average at least 80 to 100 reports per month, which means that there's more reports in the month than there are days in the month. Just data wise, women still are bearing the brunt, visibly Muslim women.
So would you say is there a correlation between the Gaza and the spike?
Yeah, so one of our benchmark figures is assessing the percentage of cases pre-7th of October and post-7th of October. So pre-7th of October, we had on average at least 2 to 3 cases per week.
Yep.
Post-Gaza, it was at least 8. So there was 18.
Allahu
18,
Akbar.
right?
Yeah.
Now, on average, what that means is I think it's a 650% increase. And that number increased straight post-Gaza.
Wow.
It plateaus, like all reporting does throughout the year. And then again, post-Bondi, there was, so pre and post-Bondi, there was I think it was 740% increase. Further increase.
Wow.
So that means that it went from, I think, at least 30 reports to 200 plus reports in the 2 months at least leading after, and still then has still steadied till around 80 to 100 reports just coming in.
Right.
Can I ask a question here? If that's okay?
Yeah, of course.
Just on the Gaza war point. Is there a breakdown of states? How does it break down by state? Is there a pattern that you sort of recognize there? If you guys want to ask a question.
Yep. Yep. So we just got a question in terms of, is there a pattern in terms of the reporting through different states and territories in Australia, especially post, the commencement of the genocide in Gaza?
It's a great question. Now, I'd love to give you a concrete answer, but I'm going to give you some really a boring answer, which is our system is so antiquated that we have to manually sometimes, before the researchers start doing their research report, manually go through all the reports. So we count, this is the register was started in 2014. So imagine what system existed then. So we have to manually go through it. We're slowly starting to optimize and adopt things where we can to measure state by state. But I can still say safely New South Wales and Victoria were the highest percentages of Islamophobia incidents. In saying that, is the awareness in South Australia the same in New South Wales? No. So it's not reflective, but proportionately to the population size, our highest 2 states are New South Wales and Victoria. And that also makes sense for the awareness of the register and the things happening within the specific states as well.
And the sheer numbers of Muslims too.
Yeah, exactly. The popular size.
I would assume the majority of the protests over the Gaza war has been in Melbourne and Sydney too. And they've been contributors, I would say.
Yep.
But I wanted to ask a question with that, because I don't think most people know enough about the register. So if you could tell the audience, I know it's self-funded. It's not funded enough.
Yeah.
It's not a government-based organisation. It's so if you could just explain about the organisation itself.
Yeah. So, the register's community-based, right? And it has received government support in various iterations at different periods, like we were speaking about. But the infrastructure at the moment is we need to onboard volunteers, because beyond the first point of call, which is receiving a report, we have referral mechanisms that we try and offer people so it doesn't feel like, and it shouldn't be, an extractive process, right? Where we're just collecting data and evidence, even though we need that for the academic research. We can offer mental health support, so it's working with organizations that might give it pro bono, discounted on a mental health plan, advocacy where we can, if it's an issue at a university and they're not making an accommodation for you to pray, we can write to the university. That's something that the register can do. And then legal advocacy. So there's partners with law firms that might do pro bono work, getting them in touch, because we know when you're within a vulnerable state, you don't have access to all this in an immediate way. And there's a lot of mental load, which is why you avoid it entirely. So we kind of take that load off and try and get them the support that they need, but advocate for them in that process. And then importantly, the liaising with police. That's that ambit of the work that we do in the victim support side. Then the key part is that national research, which is used across organizations to check it's a pulse check of Islamophobia year on year or between two years, that is used across government. It's used to accurately, within an independent research team, highlight all of the various cases. In the last two reports, there was even consideration to the anti-Palestinian and anti-Arab racism, how that interplays with Islamophobia, the perpetrators conflating those two things. And then there's a whole conversation to be had on how that's conflated intentionally to obfuscate, any racial or political discrimination. That's a separate conversation. But that all of that data gets fed into specific categories. So all the questions you're asking me on state by state, that's exactly what the research report does. We're trying to do it preemptively to give people live like data and statistics, but the bulk of that work, like that's done with veracity and methodology and all the stuff that universities require you to do, is done through the researchers. But we're trying to do it preemptively because we know community wants to know. They want to know the pattern, so they know where's concern.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing that really shocked me is 3 people.
Yeah.
3
part-time people.
What you've just mentioned would require a whole institution to run.
Yeah.
Yep.
And this is a call out to community. We only get what we put into the system. And if we're waiting for government to give us those government grants, we're going to be waiting a hell of a long time.
Yeah.
We need to be able to fund our own organisations, and this is the most, to me, this is the most imperative right now, is to fund the register in order to be able to prove to government that this is the biggest, by far and away the biggest issue there is in terms of racism, Islamophobia. I mean, there's not even a close second.
Yeah.
You can prove me wrong. I mean, I don't know, but I don't think anti-Semitism is even in the same race.
Yeah. Well, it's proportion to population as well. Then again, like, we shouldn't be in competition with any other form of discrimination. It's rightfully its own concerted deserves its own concerted attention. I
think what I really was trying to say is, I mean, they all need to be looked at.
Yeah.
But when you look at the funding arrangement that has been given to the anti-Semitic issue, which rightfully it should be, and a lot of it has been done through their own community, good on them.
Yeah.
Really, it's really a wake-up call to us is what I mean.
Agree.
If we're going to be waiting for government to give us these fundings, they won't.
Yeah, yeah.
We talked about it off record, so we're not going to. But we need to be able. And look, our community is wealthy enough now to be able to fund its own organisations.
Look at our population size. Like, forecast probably at the next census will be at 1 million. Like 1 million population in Australia. That's like, I think 3 to 4% of Australian Muslims.
Yeah. If each person, Muslim, gave 1 cup of coffee, $5. Literally, honestly, we would have $5 million in order to fund a register. Yeah. Like, and I'm not trying to belittle it. I'm actually trying to send alarm bells, because you sow what you reap. And if we're not going to be able to fund our own organisations, then what we cop in return, and we complain, then we shouldn't be complaining, because we are contributing to it by our silence and by not funding our own organisations. And that's the point. I think the register needs to be at the forefront of funding. Yeah, yeah. And it's so underfunded at the moment.
Yeah.
Aishah, for a lot of community members, one concern they have with government responses is that they fund a lot of research. They fund a lot of initiatives related to education and data collection without directly confronting like perpetrators or institutions. A lot of people have been asking, don't we already have enough evidence to act rather than continue to study the problem? So what do we say to that line of thought?
We have ample evidence to act. Study comes in tandem, so that there's a continuous pulse check of what's actually happening in community. Research comes in tandem. but it's not to subsume the responsibility to act promptly and to act now. It's not that you need to study this. It's not a scientific piece of material. We need to study it first in order to tackle it. The research isn't there just to study it as an issue. It's to report on it live, right?
Yeah.
So if there's a contention that, we're doing the research, we're going to put the money to the research so that we can keep studying it for 5 years, then that's not that's an ineffective, counterproductive approach, because we have ample evidence. We have, over 3,000 reports. We've got 5 reports, 3,000 reports of Islamophobia. We have 5 reports issued by the Register. There's other organizations across Australia that also do monitoring. There is a plethora of reasons why it's imperative now. We don't need more reasons.
Yeah. What are we waiting for, Hasham?
Well, I would argue if you don't do the research, then the legislation will never be forced to change. Yeah. You need to be able to keep funding organisations that do the research. In order to be able to go to government and say, this is a pressing issue. Yeah. Here's the evidence.
This is the evidence, yeah.
And, it's not going to happen overnight. That's the point. And I think the Islamophobic response to the envoy has proven that it won't happen overnight. But does that mean we throw the baby out with the bathwater? No, I would argue we go even harder. Yeah. We say, okay, we're going to fund the register. We're going to fund organisations that are doing the research even more in order to be able to prove a infallible point to the government that this is such a pressing issue now that you can't say no anymore. It's such a pressing need. And other organisations, to their credit, or other communities, to their credit, have shown us how to do it. That you need to be able to go to government with a pressing demand backed by evidence. Yeah. And the only evidence we've got is the registers at the moment.
Yeah, the primary evidence. We've mentioned anti-Palestinian and anti-Arab racism a little bit earlier. So the government didn't adopt the recommendation for an inquiry into anti-Palestinian and anti-Arab racism. From the cases reported to your organisation, can Islamophobia in Australia realistically be separated at this point of time from anti-Palestinian and anti-Arab racism?
Okay. There's a two-pronged question, right? Yep. When a perpetrator perpetrates violence that's anti-Palestinian, anti-Arab, it is conflated in their minds. Islamophobia is conflated in their mind, right? In saying the way that the incident appears to us, it doesn't mean that they cannot be tackled as two separate things. And they should be, because they are two separate things. One is based on religious discrimination, one is based on racial and political discrimination. Yep. Just because it manifests and the root of both of those forms of discrimination are the same, it is the same across all forms of racism, right? It's xenophobia, it's bias, it's prejudice. The roots of all forms of racism are the same. Are we going to go tackle Australian, just analogously, are we going to tackle Islamophobia with First Nations racism? It wouldn't make sense, right? Because they're two singular things. So just because their manifestation and their root is the same and perpetrators conflate them, doesn't mean they get entangled and it's used as a scapegoat or a form of gaslighting that political and racial discrimination doesn't exist.
Yep. Yeah, I think Aftab made comments around that very early into his role. They were taken, I think, at the time, out of context. But, a lot of his role did have to focus on, Islamophobia itself. Yeah. And that's why there was the recommendation for the anti-Palestinian and anti-Arab racism.
You see, things. I mean, I'll be a bit more brutal. You see, if you were to go down that path of tackling anti-Arab, anti-Palestinian racism, then you're in very dangerous water for legislators, because now it starts to fall under racial vilification. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the reasons why they didn't want to pursue a commission into it, because then it plays into the narrative that, okay, well, you're not going to treat Islamophobia because there's no religious protections, but you're going to be forced if they make a statement against an Arab or a Palestinian, even if it's conflated with Islam, because now you're falling into the racial vilification. And I think that was one of the reasons, this is me talking off the top of my head, they didn't want to go down that path. And that's why they didn't want to go into this commission, because then it does muddy the waters. Yep. To them at the moment, it's quite, to the racist element out in society, it's quite clear. I mean, how many times have we copped it? When they say, but Islam is not a race, because they know the law. Yeah. They clearly know the law.
What message does that rejection send to Palestinians and Arabs?
Well, I think I've answered it in that way. The protection that we're going to get is going to come via both racial and religious vilification laws, and we have to keep on pursuing both. at the moment we have some form of racial vilification laws in place, that if somebody makes an out-and-out racist comment based on your ethnicity, then you can pursue them under racial vilification. I think the objective for us is that we need to also be pushing equally the religious vilification law, because that's going to offer them because look, with all due respect to Sister Aishah, if she's walking down the street, I don't think they're going to be saying, excuse me, what race are you exactly?
I have this joke all the time when someone makes a comment, okay, at least let me know give me the category. Is it misogyny?
That's my
Is it racism?
Yes.
Is it Islamophobia?
Yeah, which one should you be?
You don't like my hijab? Like, what is it? Like, I want to know so I can address it.
That's my point.
Properly,
So people that are going to have that racist element in them, they're going to look at anyone with a scarf and assume that they're Arab.
Yep.
The same way that nuns get attacked because they're believed to be Muslim.
Even Sikhs, because they got the long beard and they wear a turban. Yeah. They're mistaken for Muslims. So, but they have religious racial vilification laws to protect them. Yeah. I think, if anything, we need to support AFTAB even harder to say, this will not, you want to treat the symptom and the cause. At the same time, you need to provide religious vilification, because that will cut a lot of it out. And I'm just using the LMA as the example. 99% of our commentary is around the Muslim faith.
Yep.
Imagine all of those could be prosecuted.
Mm-hmm.
But at the moment, they clearly know. They say to us, Islam is not a race. And they go hell for leather. Yeah. Because there's no protections.
Yep. Okay, and I guess next point was the government's also declined to change the legal definition of terrorism by removing its emphasis on religious, political or ideological motivation. So, obviously Aftab Malik, he considered that reform important. He put it in the recommendations. I'll direct that to you, Hajjamal.
Can I just correct it? Because I'm a big stickler on because I read things really thoroughly. His recommendation in his report, at no point does he actually suggest to change the definition of terrorism. That is like a massive media misinformation, and you can't reject something that hasn't actually been recommended. There was consideration that he made in his in the report of looking at how counterterrorism laws disproportionately affect Muslims. Correct. That was the language that was used. Correct. And then the media has gone into this storm of, look how hard the government is going down on Aftab and the Islamophobia envoy on rejecting this law that they're trying to propagate, but it's factually
100%. Yeah. But even assuming that he did, let's assume he did, because I believe he should have anyway, because my argument is based on two reasons. When you have a terrorist attack by anyone other than the Muslim faith, does their religion come into the picture? Mm-hmm. When Brendan Tarrant went off on his little tangent, did they say this was Christian extremism? Did they call it, this is the Christian terrorism? None of that came into play. And I think until we learn to change that sort of that terminology, and that's what I think he was pushing for, a different view of terminology. But my gripe really was the response. It was telling when the Prime Minister said, it was basically saying, we don't think, we don't trust you enough yet. Just be careful. We gave you some money to do some research, but
it was a very moderate recommendation.
Oh, it was basically that I trust my security advisors over you, but your security advisors, with all due respect to them, aren't Muslims. They're not living that experience. Aftab Malik and we are. And the terminology, but I think the response, the way he said it, was more of a lecturing. That just don't overstep your mark, sort of thing, and that was more telling to me. That we're not on the same plane level yet. We're still treated like the poor cousin.
Can I also chime in? Sorry, as a producer, but can I just chime in and say, is this the same intelligence agencies that figured that it'd be a smart idea to ram the car of a bunch of teenage kids?
Oh yeah.
Well, Muslims coming up from Melbourne were going to be a threat.
Or indoctrinate a 13-year-old autistic child. Anyway, we're going into dangerous territories, mate. We don't want to get removed off here, or totally.
but I think, sorry, again, you guys can make the point on the thing. I should give myself a microphone. I think what it speaks to is there's an institutional understanding, almost a caricature of Muslims at the institutional level that's not guided by, as you said, Muslims themselves or people that understand the community.
Yeah.
And so they effectively have a caricature that they're working with.
Yeah, but look, again,
and I think that becomes a problem when you're dealing with security agencies.
but I want to be a realist. I mean, we've got to call fair.
You framed the question a little bit, Haj, just for our viewers, because I don't think they heard.
So basically, I think our wonderful producer was saying that the institutions that monitor us, or the protection security institutions, the character the Muslim community in a certain light, and that sort of prevails over everything, sort of paraphrasing. But a lot of that, sadly, we've contributed to. I mean, I don't know, you'd have to make a comment, Aishah, but I think we have. Honestly, I can't help but be honest and say we've contributed to it in our own negligence. We go about our life laissez-faire and just nothing, and we don't care about what happens. And we got this tough, macho attitude about life, and then it comes back to bite us. When we start to become more organised, as for example the register, when we start to become more outspoken about the unfair treatment of our community, when we start to go down that path rather than the reactionary path, is going to be part of our medicine that we need to cop. We need to do things differently in a nutshell, and we need to be more organised in how we do it. We need to be more not corporate, but just.
We need to mobilize together better. In saying that, the Muslim community is a young community, so whatever we do right now is setting a precedent for how we work together organizationally for the next generation. So what system are we setting up for them if it's a poor, poorly organized one? And what psychological environment are we, enabling with our lack of organization for them too? Precisely,
and that's what I'm saying. We've contributed to this melee that we're in, because sadly, and I think we spoke about this when we were online previously, we still have this mentality of divide and conquer in us. We see the greater enemy ourselves than we see the wider world. We have this issue that we all compete for the airspace. So even when it comes to government, you have so many competing voices trying to tell government what's wrong and how to fix it. And I agree, Sister Aishah, this is the remedy for us, is we need to mobilise together. Yep. We can't say, look, LMA, you go mobilise and we're going to be behind you supporting you. No, we need to start learning to hold each other's hands and say, look, when you go in there, I'm in there with you fully.
Yep. Yeah. It's about renewing our intentions. Because if our intention is for the greater good of the Muslim community, then it's not really about just one organisation or one group or one sheikh.
Because we understand that one person's benefit is everyone's benefit. Like we truly believe that that's the only... It's the same concept of like one part of the body hurts all of the like that's part of our Islamic ethos. That's the core of our ethos.
SubhanAllah, I was about to say the same thing. We all talk about it when it comes to the religion or the Sunnah, or we know it by heart. We all are all in it together. But when it comes to really putting it into practice, you find there's a lot of holes in our organisation or ability to confront things. Like even when we were putting like the press release that we were talking about, there's so much pushback from within community. It's sad. It really is sad. And that's what I'm saying. I don't want to throw all the issues onto the government or its institutions. We've enabled a lot of it, whether purposely, by default, by our own. I don't know, but we've contributed to a lot of it. And when we start to, for lack of a better word, I'm trying to think of proper words, wake up and realize that the only way we're going to get out of this is together. When they stop playing this divide and conquer on us, and we go in there together, hand in hand, and say, look, we represent 1 million Muslims, Sunni, Shi'i, Alawis, everyone's in it, this boat. That's when you force change to happen. Because at the end of the day, we all know politicians react to votes. When there's 1 million people, they know there's 1 million that are all in the same position here at the moment, calling for religious vilification law. Let's say for that, for example. You don't think that's going to persuade them? 1 million votes. Like every single Muslim says, hey, the most important thing for me right now is religious vilification laws. That's the power of numbers that we've got to learn to utilise. Gone into a tangent again, but
no, it's all good. It's all beneficial, inshallah. We'll go through a couple more questions, inshallah, before closing up.
Just on that point, can we just get Aishah to comment on the importance of at least institutions understanding the community better, because that's really at the core of my question. It's about the institutions themselves as well.
Muslim institutions or government institutions?
So,
Yeah.
I'll leave that to you. So just
Okay.
government institutions and their understanding of the Muslim community.
Yeah. Or the infrastructure, I guess, that the register provides. Is that the question?
Also, what I'm getting at is connecting that back to the issue of
Yeah.
the anti-terror laws.
Mm-hmm.
Again, if there's a disproportionate use of those laws and targeting of those laws towards the Muslim community, how does that then impact on Islamophobia in society?
Yeah.
Like the loudest voice is always going to be the government's, and so whatever they do is going to impact our community, whether we're united or not. And so I think there's like, why would have to even make that recommendation in the first place if there wasn't a need for that to combat Islamophobia in and of itself? Again, sorry for not having a whole hopefully.
Look, Aman and MLN do great work on security measures and the impact of the securitization of the Muslim community. What I can say is, from a reporting perspective, when you speak to victims, so much of their hesitancy of reporting is because they feel like they've been hyper-surveilled most of their lives, and they will only contribute to having their lives continuously policed in a way if they give up their agency and talk about their story to a government agency. Or to police or to any form of authority. So when a community is already on the back foot in terms of its psyche, being discriminated at from every angle, the level of the appetite and the capacity to get them to understand and the process of reporting makes it even harder. Like you are it feels like sometimes you're staring at the barrel, but we're talking about a community that's come through lots of different stages in the world, right? Without speaking on behalf of organizations that do this work expertly, and the discrimination already based on a base level is not getting addressed. So if we don't have it addressed on a high structural institutional level, we can't even get on the baseline people to report it.
100%. But can I ask you a question? Do organisations like ASIO, for example, do they get their statistics on Islamophobia? Would they rely on the register? Do they have their own research?
I can't comment. I have no idea. So.
Because they're formulating policy based on, obviously,
their own intelligence.
So
it must be internal. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So they're not contacting you guys or anyone else from within the community.
Not that I know. Well, they have the National Hate Crime Database, which got incepted, I think, maybe a year or two ago.
Do you know who they get there? Would they rely on organisation like yourself in order to get the data?
No, they have their own reporting mechanism.
Wow.
And then police have their own reporting mechanism through Crime Stoppers, and that's how they kind of get their evidence.
But that's those who will go to the police. What about the ones who don't? They're not going anywhere. They're not being recorded by their organisations. Really, what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
So they would dispute the 800% rise because they'd say, well, that doesn't reflect in our records, but your records are only police records. They're not.
That's the constant conversation that we have when we liaise for victims with police, which is, can you get more people to report to us? And then we explain, and they know this, that there's historical distrust, there's safety concerns, there's security concerns. And so we try as much as we can. We're also very precious with people's consent. Like, these are hyper police, hyper vulnerable people, and the information, their stories, and their experiences are not just pieces of data that you just hand over willy nilly, right? It takes so much people to even get to the stage where they do that. So it's a continuous evolving relationship, but it's not the data that probably exists on a national database. I can't say that reflects what we receive, because we know that community is coming to us.
Correct.
And then they will always prefer this than...
That's right. It's less confronting.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
Shocking.
We'll move on a little bit into the government's initiatives that they've announced. The Education Task Force, curriculum review, mosque security measures, So what safeguards are needed to ensure that these don't become symbolic announcements with little measurable outcomes, Haj?
Okay. Look, I've always, all my life, I've been an advocate that change only happens through education. You can legislate as much as you want. You can keep on throwing good money after bad money. But if we don't address the key roots of racism, and the only way I believe you can address them is education. You need to be able to teach kids at a very early age about this concept of multiculturalism and different cultures and different religions and tolerance, and at a very, very minute level. And if that's their intention in throwing money at education, I'm all for it. My caveat and the bit that worries me is, will that education curriculum involve Muslim community feedback and consultation, or again will it be top down? Education board says we believe this is the appropriate way to go, with zero involvement of community. That's my fear. Mm-hmm. But if they're broad-minded enough to accept that the community is best to relay their experiences. Yeah. And formulate a way of education, then I'm all for it. It's one of the bright lights of the. Like
what I'm understanding from you, Haj, is to safeguard these initiatives, there must be like true community representation.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've seen it a lot with a lot of different departments where they have different advisory councils and advisory boards, and we've sat on a lot of them. Yep. And some of them, this is actually going to go somewhere, and some are just.
I'll give you an example. For example, one of the recommendations of that was that we talk about the Palestinian issue. Now, if we're going to educate people on the root cause of the Palestinian issue, then I would hope they would reach out to someone like APAN and say, well, you represent the Palestinian Australians. You tell us what the curriculum should look like. And that's what I'm hoping it is, because that's an inclusive one. But when something is it's a poor example, something I can think of. When I was growing up and we were taught about First Nations people, it wasn't from the First Nations people's view. We were taught from the British point of view about First Nations. And I hope it's not that again, because to me that's lecturing. That's not education. That's lecturing what we think your issues are. And this is what we think the root cause is. No, all communities should have an involvement in if we're going to address the cause of racism in a general sense. And I hope the education process is going to be inclusive and not sort of top down.
Yeah, sister.
Yeah, my point is that it builds on that, but it's to do with having a concrete plan and implementation plan. There is very little structure and transparency in how they're going to actually implement these education initiatives. There's no committed funding amount. There's no way that they're going to, what work plans or what action plans that they have that are practical in place that will be consulted with community. So there needs to be transparency around what investment, where it's going, who's going to be consulted to do it, how are we going to measure its success, how we'll know that it's going to be effective. That's how you prove to community that you're taking this seriously. It's more than just, like you said, symbolism, right? When we say that there's a pathway that we can then, use as a bookmark to measure and track if that initiative that you did propose, which is one of the few that you did propose, is actually going into fruition. So that's building on that concern is just, we need to see structure and investment and a better understanding of what the implementation process will look like for it too.
If you expand that to the funding for security of mosques, to me, you're band-aiding solutions. That's not going to resolve the issue. I mean, we're going to turn it into Fort Knox, Lakemba Mosque. Well, that doesn't solve the problem. Again, it's not addressing the root cause. And I think that's what AFTA was trying to go at length to talk about, was there are underlying causes of it. You can window dress or you can band-aid as much as you want. Yeah. I don't think throwing good money after bad on security of religious institutions, but they're not addressing the fact that why are people feeling the need to go and attack mosques? Look, the media has gone feral on the Muslim community. So why don't we address the root causes of why do certain media outlets just take constant top pot shots at the Muslim community? And then, you've got listeners who don't rationalize it and think, okay, I've bought into it, and they go throw a pig's head at the mosque. They're the root causes. It's not security of the mosque that's the issue. The issue is, let's get serious about racism and address what's causing it.
It would actually be a productive exercise for them fiscally to even do that.
Yeah.
Is to address it in a preventative way and not a reactionary way. Like there's a lot of things in there like Muslim women's well-being and leadership, because they've acknowledged that Islamophobia is gendered, okay?
Yep.
And that is a historic kind of announcement. There's never been an announcement of that kind of that nature. But in saying that, do Muslim women have to continuously experience it and then go through well-being programs? No, that's not the productive way to address the issue. So yeah, just
100%. And I think that is to the cause of what. Look, credit to Aftab. He was trying to say, I'm not here to tell you throw money at band-aiding.
Yeah.
There are root causes, and if you don't address the root causes, then you'll be throwing billions. And I'll give you one perfect example, and I hate using it, but it's the best example I can think of that ever happened. They threw billions at this DRAD program, de-radicalization. Where did it get them? The point is that money could have been so well spent on an education program that was in depth, that really brought in those kids that they were trying to de-radicalize, brought them back into society. And we talk about social cohesion. I think it would cost them far less if they actually put good money into creating social cohesive programs rather than the DRAD, for example. And I agree. If they just threw that same amount of money in education, then you wouldn't have to throw money at mosques to protect themselves, because everyone would think places of worship all our lives when we were growing up were sacrosanct. I can't see anyone wanting to go and bomb a synagogue or a church or a mosque. I don't see what the benefit is. I really genuinely don't. And for centuries, religion was held as sacrosanct. But all of a sudden now, because we've been fueling this tide of racism, mosques are no longer protected. Churches are no longer protected. Synagogues are no longer protected.
And if you think about it psychologically, it's the place where people are the most vulnerable, because your consciousness is in a different place. And so if you take away that from community, you take away a place of safety where you're allowed to drop your shoulders down and be vulnerable, then what is that doing to the community? You're on perpetual hyper-policing. Yeah. I know I have like 3 brothers, and I know that they probably, are a bit like tough about it. But at least for me, I'm constantly looking out. I'm overexposed, and I have a bias because I see reports day in, day out. But we're conscious. None of the places that we considered safe are safe anymore.
Oh, look! In this Ramadan, we had the elderly who wouldn't come to the prayers because they were scared to walk because the mosque had received 4 death threats.
Yeah.
Is that the society we all want? I mean, it's not what I want, and I don't believe. I don't want to be too hard, but I genuinely don't believe the government is serious about addressing root causes. Money will dry up eventually. And if you don't address it, then we're going to throw another lot of bad, good money after bad, and not address what the root causes are. When the likes of Pauline Hanson can talk about white Australia and not be condemned by every single person that's factually incorrect. Australia was originally by the First Nations. There's no such thing as this white Australia policy, but it's tolerated. Because there's this stigma of being able to go too politically against anything, because then you lose votes. I think it's going to take a very brave government that says, we need to apologise to the First Nations for a start, and then address the root causes of racism. And we don't care what the blowback will be from the community, because it's sometimes the medicine is better for you. And you need to take that medicine. And I don't see any government leader at the moment who's that brave. I don't, sadly.
Sister Aishah, from your perspective and from the Register's perspective, do you believe there's been a good response from the government in terms of the Islamophobia Envoy's report? Or do you believe, there's been a double standard in the way that they've responded to this report in comparison to the Anti-Semitism Envoy's report? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, look, I'll speak on it on a factual angle, right? Because that's all I can do. I believe the anti-Semitism report came down in July of 2025, and then you got a response in December. The Islamophobia Envoy response got it in twice the amount of time. And then the visual iconography that surrounds both of those reports are very interesting. One shows an image of Australia, and it's integrated with blue and whatnot. And the other one is just very distinct Islamic like calligraphy type pieces, right? And it might seem like such a menial thing to talk about, but as someone who's like been in the arts, been in language, and all of us understand how language and positioning and timing are all intentional things that contribute to the way that we frame community. I think at media, I know one of the digital editors, Swaliha, she goes and she fact checks the way that media reports things and the way that government positions things. And it's all intentional. And it creates, unfortunately, what shouldn't be a comparison. Human rights are not a finite resource, right? It's not like there's a piece of pie and that's not how it works, right? And ultimately, when we advocate for our protection and all we're advocating for is not exceptionalism. It's equal treatment. And so all I can say is that the response to any form of discrimination to each other should be equal. Yeah.
Inshallah. I'll do a final question, inshallah, where we'll just, sum things up through it. In 12 months' time, 12 months after the government's response has been, made public, what do you genuinely hope for in terms of, Islamophobia and, where we get to in 12 months' time and the programs or the recommendations that they're going to take on board? Where do we hope to be in 12 months' time, inshallah?
12 months, I hope I'm still alive. Number one. Number two, not in jail. Number three, and being serious, I don't want to sound pessimistic, but I don't see much hope. I really don't. I genuinely don't. Until we start, and again, I know I'm flogging this horse, but I got to flog it because that's the only hope that I think we have. Until we start to learn to, from the ground root up, to work together. Change is not going to happen by government in 12 months, 2 years, 12 years, 15 years. It's just not. We're not that important on their radar, as a community. We're not. Sadly, we're not. We all lived through the Christchurch tragedy, and that wasn't enough to wake people up to say, look, we've got to be a bit more sensitive how we talk about anyone's faith. If anything, it emboldened people.
It's worth noting Brendan's right was from Australia. Those ideological leanings he had were cultivated, furnished, stoked here.
Well, if I tell you, Sister Aishah, the death threats that we got, he praised him.
Yeah.
They were his manifesto.
Yeah.
So it's emboldened them.
And it was the same manifesto that the San Diego shooters referenced as well.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. So am I hopeful in 12 months? No. But what I do hope is that we've learnt the lessons. And my hope is us, really. Wallah, I do. And I use the Prophet Allahumma salli alayhi as the Sunnah. He didn't go to, when he was in Makkah, he didn't say, look, it's a forlorn case, the Quraysh are stubborn, they're not going to do anything. No, he gathered his supporters around and he realized the only way we're going to do this is by being a joint force, even though they were severely outnumbered in Badr, but they were one. They all believed in a cause. They all were walking, marching, holding hand, in belief in a cause. And in 12 months, that's my hope, that we've learnt these lessons, that, as long as we stay divided, then we're never going to get any change at all. And we're just going to be accepting of whatever we're given. And change starts with us first. That's what I hope in 12 months.
Allah khair. Sister Aishah.
Yeah, I would say that it's for the benefit of, the vulnerable, the victims, the people that have given us the amana and the responsibility to be in leadership spaces. Like, that is a precious responsibility, and we need to do that justice. And so in the next 12 months, I hope that, people in organizations like us, like the Register, like myself, can at least give people that we can't give them the reassurance that the government will take them seriously. We can't give them the reassurance that, there's X amount of money being invested. But what we can give them is that we actually have so much support alongside us to do the work that we need to do, because we have community. We have community, and that will be our baseline. So no matter what happens, we'll always have that as a form of security to all of our all the concerns we have. Yeah.
Can I ask a sister? Just a question off the record, nothing to do with this. If people want to contribute to the register, we haven't covered that.
That was actually a question on the live stream. How do we donate?
How do people donate? How do people become contribute?
That's a great question, and it's a great lead, and you guys are doing my job for me, mashallah.
I think this is crucial for us.
Yep. So I've just actually finished setting up our launch good. So we have a launch good that will be coming out, inshallah. And then we will be doing a fundraising dinner in 2 months, inshallah. Getting some of our key figureheads in to talk about their experience of Islamophobia. People like athletes, Tina Rahimi, and just supporting us in our crowd fundraising, because we have no other option of survival if we don't crowd fundraise and rely on community.
But if someone wants to donate, can they go to a website?
Yeah, they can go.
Soon
They,
you'll be through LaunchGood.
it'll be through a launch group, but you can also go directly through our website. We've got a donation option
Okay. So
there.
Islamophobic.
So
Islamophobia.
Islamophobia Register Australia.
Yeah, that's it. Islamophobia
And we'll try to link it in the comments,
Please, yeah.
inshallah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Inshallah. Okay, Sister Aishah Ali and Brother Jamal, Jazakallah Kheir both, for joining us tonight. It was our pleasure to have you, over here,
100%.
join us in this conversation. And to everyone, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So,
Salam. We're off.